Okay, let's continue our discussions on this slide in this video. If you've ever watched a detective television show or read a book where there's like the smart detective and then the kind of silly, bumbling police detectives, then there's a common theme, which is that the smart detective will see some kind of obscure clue or something that doesn't add up, something that doesn't match, and they'll kind of focus in on that and realize it's important, whereas the other kind of incorrect, kind of stupid policeman will have their theory, and these little clues will be like distractions, or kind of they'll want to ignore those because it won't fit in with their theory. So when we're reading a detective book or watching a movie, then we're kind of seeing out of the eyes of the smart detective and figuring that he's going to solve the case. And so that makes sense to us. But in real life, because we're operating in not in breakthroughs, or hopefully that'll change, but when we're just trying to get to a particular result, then these things that don't match, they're a little bit blurry, they wouldn't make sense necessarily. Or they might be clear certain things that are like solid footholds, but they don't, again, seem important because we're just trying to move forward. We don't necessarily need these little places to stand or these little truths. And so they'll be treated like they're unimportant, when in fact they're extremely valuable. When you're trying to have a breakthrough and then you're trying to, remember I talked about you want to organize what you know, then you don't yet, while you're organizing what you don't yet know what's going to be important. So first, everything that is particularly solid and clear, whether it seems like it's going to be the thing that helps you or not, it's going to be very important potentially. So you want to treat it like it's valuable. You know how people skip over something? Let's say you're watching a video in the training for getting free traffic, and someone might skip over something in their mind and not really remember it. And later they'll say, oh, I didn't think that was important at the time, right? Well, if you could say such a thing as, I didn't think that was important at the time, then it means you were judging when you should have been understanding. And this is a extremely common mistake that's happening nonstop with people in their learning and in their conversations with other people and so forth, is that they're judging and understanding at the same time. And so when should you judge? Interestingly enough, you never really need to judge, because what's happening when you're judging is you're mostly rushing kind of like on a deadline and just sort of looking at something blurry or uncertain and just deciding that it is certain. If you understand something clearly with no blurriness, there's no judgment, right? If I were to put, I don't have a slide like this, but if I were to show you a slide with two big circles, like two big dots on it, and I were to say judge how many dots there were, that would sound weird, right? Because there's just obviously two huge dots, so there's two of them. So judging has this idea of it basically has a fundamental blurriness or uncertainty to it, and you have to pick one. And so all you're doing is artificially rushing if you're judging. You just can go ahead and never judge. There's that Myers-Briggs personality profile, right? Where, what is it, like perceiving versus judging is one of the personality types. But judging is an invalid part of a personality. It's a wrong methodology. And I understand that sometimes in life we just have to make a decision on the best information that we have. But even then, it isn't exactly a judging. If you're basically either picking at random, or you're picking the thing that is most reasonable to choose, right? So if something makes more sense or has more of a chance of being correct, and you're being rushed by circumstances, then you have to go with that. But you want to try to avoid that type of circumstance as much as possible. And someone might say, well, what if you have a criminal or a potential criminal, and you can't know for sure if they did it, but we can't just let everyone go because we don't have perfect proof, and so forth. That's fine, but that actually just doesn't really come up in your own life very, very often. If I was in charge of the criminal justice system, then I would be looking for ways to more and more and more narrow down so that doesn't happen, and we have clear guidelines and so forth. as much as possible. I understand that at some point you just have to choose with the best facts that you have. But we'd certainly want to avoid the situation we have now where you have prosecutors that particularly want to get convictions rather than figure out the truth, right? So here's an example of something that people can know, but, well, even that thing I talked about with those arbitrary expectations and how it doesn't really make any sense. Remember I talked about how, what if a place that you like to go was half an hour away, or what if you got hypnotized so you thought it was right close to you and then you were upset? That's an example of a small clue, but that can break this entire incorrect way of operating. But people tend to not break through this way of operating and measuring by milestones and distance and checking things off. They'll go through their whole life that way. And even though there's all sorts of clues and indications that that way of operating isn't correct. If they were trying to have a breakthrough, then they would treat these little cracks in the wall as potentially incredibly important. Same thing if you're trying to learn something. When you're trying to build understanding, you don't know where that ultimate, like that central foundation, that kind of trunk of the tree or whatever is going to come from. And so you start to focus on what you can know without worrying about whether it's important yet. And you just want to start organizing and building from there, right? Maybe you take a couple of small branches and they connect into a thicker, larger branch that's closer to the trunk. You think that might be the trunk, but it's not. But by following that, you're going to get to the trunk. There's so many different clues in life that could lead to the things that I've discovered, but instead people tend to delete and marginalize them and just not think that they're important or pay attention. Somebody could realize that the idea that you should feel bad is a nonsense concept. Of course you should never feel bad. What you should do is always feel good. And if your worldview is such that it makes sense that you should feel bad sometimes, then again, that's a contradiction. And so that should be a crack in the wall, and you should realize that there's something fundamentally wrong with your worldview, and you want to break out of it rather than defend it. And then I'll say that, and sometimes someone will say back to me, they'll say, no, David, you don't understand. Some people, they're just happy or feeling bad. And if at the point where someone's making that objection or coming to that conclusion, again, they're just deleting. They're like that silly detective who is just saying, oh, that clue doesn't matter, or that problem with my theory doesn't matter. Let's just ignore that, right? Because they just want it to fit. These clues and these things that seem wrong, you see, if your brain has this model where it's trying to make forward progress and hit milestones, and once it hits a milestone, it's like check, and then it moves forward, then if there's something off to the side that looks like, wait, maybe, or something that makes it look like, hey, wait, maybe I should stop and pause and make sure this thing isn't going wrong, that feels like it's actually an impediment when your brain is trying to make forward progress. So it wants you to ignore those things. It feels like no progress is being made. If you were to stop and try to resolve something that's blurry or resolve resistance instead of moving forward, your brain can make you feel like, hey, wait a second, now that you're sitting here trying to have this breakthrough and getting rid of this resistance here, that you're not moving forward at all. You're just still. You're standing still trying to make this breakthrough. What's the point of that? Like, even though there's resistance, and I'm now speaking for your brain, I'm being incorrect, right? I'm being a spokesman for an incorrect thing. So your brain is telling you, hey, you're not moving forward at all right now. Move forward. Look at these other people. They're moving forward. They might be encountering resistance, but at least they're pushing on. But that's wrong. What's correct is to break through the resistance, because then forevermore you're not going to have that, and you will surpass these other people if that were necessary. I mean, life is not about surpassing other people ultimately, but that's where it's going to you're going to be able to surpass them. I spent my 20s. I didn't make all that much money, but I was teaching accelerated learning, and it took me very little time in order to do. I worked at the beginning of the fall semester getting students, and then I would teach like a few times a week for about 5 to 8 weeks, and then I'd be done, and then maybe I'd do that one more time in the spring. So maybe a month of making sales and 2 months of fulfilling on that twice, and I was all set. So I made enough money that I had a stable base. I was okay. But there were other people, most everyone else made more money than me. And there would be a general idea from people in my life that maybe I should be doing something else and making more money. But the strange thing was, if I looked at those people that were supposedly moving so much faster than me and doing so much better, at the end of the year, they'd basically have no money anyway. They would basically make more money and then spend more money. So they'd have more experience, like it would just kind of, we'd end up in the exact same place. They would be running around, flapping their arms and legs more than I was. And then we, again, just end up in the same place. But I was diverting a lot of resources and trying to break through this blurriness and try to understand what was fundamentally going on with things that were clearly important and part of my life every single day, causing resistance or blurriness. And so the end result is if life was a competition, which is not, then I shot past those people by far. And now nobody suggests that I should go find a job, and so forth. So that methodology and that model of stopping and focusing and having a breakthrough and focusing on these little clues and footholds was exactly right. And theoretically, it had to be right? This breakthrough model has to be correct compared to this milestone checkbox model. However, everyone else is operating in that milestone, distance traveling checkbox model of getting stuff done and measuring progress by how much distance you travel. So it can feel wrong because the way our brain works is it works on standards and norms, which I expanded on pretty well in a previous series, and I'll expand on more in the future. But all right, so let's see here. Here's another quick example that can help give you a sense of footholds. I once was talking to a student who was particularly good at math. I was helping a group of kids. They were like between high school and college, and I was helping them prepare them for college. And most of the people there, they weren't that good at math. They were just kind of normal. They weren't like behind or anything. They were all going to be going into the University of Virginia. But one of the kids was recognized as being particularly great at math. And so I asked him how he approached a math problem in his head when he came across it. And what he said was, the first thing he would say to himself, like he would look at a math problem, and I was a little bit like this guy. I had a similar process, so I recognized it. He would look at the problem and he wouldn't know the answer or even how to do the answer right away, just like everybody else. So most everyone looks at a fairly complicated math problem, the kind you get like toward the end of high school or college, and he wouldn't know exactly how to do the answer. Not only would he not know the actual answer, but he wouldn't even know exactly how to do it. In plenty of cases, sometimes he would, but plenty of times he wouldn't. But his response to that would be different than most everyone else. Most people, they would get a bit of a sense of panic and frustration when that would happen. They'd kind of freeze up. And then they would try, the people that did it wrong, then they would try to make some analogy to something else. They try to kind of force fit that problem into one of the templates that they'd memorized. And that might work and it might not. But it was a kind of scary, frustrating process filled with some panic. With this guy who was particularly good, he would not know the answer immediately, but he would say to himself, this question wouldn't be on the test unless we've been taught how to do it, unless we've been taught like kind of the building blocks of how to do it. And then he would just start to organize what he knows. And he wouldn't try to judge, of course he would be picking things that seem related to the question at hand, but he wouldn't be trying to decide whether a particular piece of information that he knew, like a particular formula that he'd memorized, or some of the information given in the problem itself in the test, whether it was important. He would just start to organize that information, kind of list it and get his bearings. And so what you're doing is you're organizing these things that you know. They're little footholds. You might not need each and every one of the footholds, but you don't know which one you need. And so you get a sense of, you want to kind of build up these places that are solid, right? Or organize these places that are solid that you can build from. And then you could try to build from different places and see where it starts to work. So you can use this line here about solid footholds and clues are far more valuable than often realized. You can use that feeling to see how well you're shifting in the paradigm into this model of breakthroughs and consolidating rather than results and checkboxes and milestones and so forth. Because if these clues and footholds don't seem important to you, then like clues are like things that don't add up, right? That are kind of out of place, that they don't fit. And a foothold is something very solid where it's clear. And if those types of things feel important to you, then that's a good sign. And if they feel like they're irrelevant and you want to skip past them, then you want to stop and say, wait a second, that's my default previous paradigm is running the show here, and that's probably not going to get me nearly as good results as I want. Or it might get me results, but it's going to, over time, it's going to build up like kind of gunk or resistance or blurriness and confusion. Okay, now this next line here, I write how to spend resources, how to get the most bang per buck, what about synergy, and avoiding missed opportunities. All right, trying to figure out where you spend your money, your time, your different types of focus with your brain, and your conscious attention, and your real you conscious, like kind of resisting and digging, or when to put your reputation on the line and so forth, then it's very difficult to decide and to spend resources properly and to divert them properly when you have this wrong mental model of trying to travel a bunch of distance and check things off and getting results. So if you have a goal that you want to make $10,000 a month, and then you want to check that box, and then you want to move on to $20,000 a month, then it's pretty hard to know where you're going to spend your resources. Now, some people who are wealthy and successful, they will give you advice that ends up maximizing this distance and checkbox model, where they'll say, okay, look, if you want to make $10,000 in a month, then here's the key. Just spend, like, only perform actions that are going to make you at least that much money or more. Now, that's logically true given the premise, but all it's really doing is breaking the problem into smaller pieces, but you're still in the wrong place. You know, if your goal is you want to make $10,000 a month, and I say, well, there's 30 days in a month, and therefore you divide 10,000 by 30, right, and you get like 333, so you have to make $333 a day, and then you might say, well, you might push it and work 10 hours a day, and so you have to make $33 an hour, then that still isn't going to really, it might look like it helps, and it might help somebody more than, like, if they're in this progress and distance getting stuff done model, then that can help maximize it. So you might be able to operate better within that model with breaking it down like that. So it's useful advice for that reason. But I don't think like that. I don't operate that way at all. I'm in a totally different mental model. I personally have never set a goal for how much money that I wanted to make. And as a matter of fact, the one way that I did that, I didn't reach it for a long, long time. For a long time, I just wanted to make $2,000 a month, kind of like residual or reliably on my own business. And I had that number for a while, and it didn't particularly help me. Now I make a good deal more than that. And I didn't really set any particular income goals at that point, or to reach what I am now. So instead, of course, just in this breakthrough model and consolidating model. All right. So, and this enables me to spend resources in this terrific way. Where, all right. So if you're trying to build a business, you need the traffic, conversion, and product. Now, I did a little bit of extra thinking about this since I did the last video, and really, I would say, all things being equal, focusing, like if you're not quite sure, focusing in on product is what it's probably smarter, because that's kind of the cornerstone of your value is going to be the product or service that fundamentally you're making the money from. Now, it's not correct that if you have a terrific product, you'll just automatically make money. It's not like people will just show up in your cornfield and start buying. However, now it is, interestingly enough, I do think it is pretty true that if you have a great product and if you have a fair amount of traffic, then the conversion actually is pretty easy at that point. Like if you just understand to be at least like fairly clear about your offer, then you'll do reasonably well. But there's probably still going to be, you can still probably improve, 3, 4, 5 10 times by increasing your conversion at that point as well. So it's somewhat irrelevant if I say that the conversion is fairly easy. But so let's imagine that we decide, we say, all right, well, I need traffic, I need conversion, I need a product. And what did I say you do if you're not sure, and there's 3 places where you're sure, you know you have to break through in 3 places, and you're not sure where to start? I say pick one basically at random, right? And so I personally prefer product. But that it may be, if you clearly have a preference for one of the other ones, then I would probably go with that. And if you don't have a preference, then maybe go with product first. And then after you break through with product, I would probably go to traffic, and then I'd probably deal with conversion last. Okay, so now we've decided that, let's suppose now for the sake of argument, that we're trying to build a business, and we're just getting started, and we need our first breakthrough. And so we've decided that we're going to focus with product. Now, there's an overall breakthrough with a product where you've crushed it forever, and you don't necessarily need to hit that. Because that's also, in one sense, that's sort of a breakthrough, what I just described, where there's no resistance forever with your product. But it's also a bit of a long-range result. And the point I'm trying to get at here is that if you can identify, this was so helpful for me when I became top of the world in Magic. What I would do is I would identify the kind of the closest, easiest threshold or breakthrough that I needed to achieve, where it was going to be pretty much downhill from there, where the result that I needed might come fairly far after that. So if I was playing a match with the game Magic the Gathering, there might be something that might happen on like the first or second or third turn, where at that point, inevitably, I could just sort of be in flow and consolidate and win, even though I might not win until like the 20th turn, maybe, you know. And when you're trying to win in Magic, you're reducing your opponent from 20 life points to 0. But I might have achieved that breakthrough, and they might still be at 20 life points, where I haven't made any progress yet in reducing the life total from 20 to 0, which is how you win. But because I identified this breakthrough that was a lot easier to hit, where everything was going to be kind of downhill from there, then I could put all my resources into making sure I hit that relatively easy breakthrough. And by operating that way, I would tend to hit it. And other people's resources were kind of spread out and unfocused, because they were thinking about that final result and trying to like make linear progress towards that final result, and in a manner of speaking, trying to like pace themselves, right? Or they're kind of like putting 1/20 of the resources, let's say. It's not exactly like this, but this gives you an indication. If you have to reduce your opponent from 20 to 0, then you can think like, oh, I need to kind of use 1/20 of my resources, you know, for each of those points that I reduced my opponent by. Again, that's kind of an oversimplification of how other people might operate in a less effective way, but it kind of gives a sense of what they were doing. And if I could identify something, I could be much more specific if you guys actually played Magic. But for example, I identified a spell called Ancestral Recall that if I were able to cast it, it lets you draw 3 cards, and if you design your whole strategy around that, kind of consolidated around that, then you could, if you played that one card, then you could generally win. And I would win like probably well over 90% of the time, nearly 100% of the time, once I could cast that card, use that card. And so I would just put all my focus into being able to get that card, play the card, and win once I had it, like consolidate afterwards. And that was exceptionally effective. I'm oversimplifying because you guys, plenty of people listening to this don't understand Magic, so I'm just giving. If you do play that, that's grossly oversimplified. But it was so doable. Like you can imagine, right? I bring all my leverage on that one fairly easy thing to do, and other people were spread out with their resources in these other ways. So when about 7 years ago, I had an opportunity to help with a product launch that ended up being quite big, and that's when I broke through with my understanding of how to launch a successful online business. I really knew how to do it at that point, how it all worked. Although some of the skills necessary for it, I didn't have. But given a certain team of people, then I knew how to do it. When I got started with OMG Machines about 2.5 years ago, I was very close with Mike, and we had broken through years before that with our working relationship very well. And Mike is particularly able to bring in potential customers, like traffic. He's just really, really good at that. So that was taken care of. And I understood conversion, especially if I'm working with Mike, then together with Mike, then conversion was taken care of. And there was a certain type of product that I wanted us to be able to deliver, but I didn't really have the skill to do that. And for Mike to do it, he was going to have to be particularly focused there, and he wouldn't be able to do what he otherwise does well. It just would have spread him too thin. And maybe I could have focused in and tried to learn to deliver that product, which was to teach search engine optimization, but it really wasn't, I didn't really have like the personality chemistry to particularly do that, as well as someone who really was ready to do it, could and would do it. And plus I have this burden where I really want to work on and share the stuff I'm sharing with you now. And so it's a little hard for me at that point and still to really focus in and be a product creator for a different type of product. So then Greg came along, and he couldn't have been more perfect at what I knew that we needed in order to make this all work. And so because it was all I needed, that was the only breakthrough I had to have, was to kind of just fully make things work with Greg. Then I just kind of diverted all of my personal resources into, I didn't have to spend much money to do it. But I let go of a previous business that was making me money, and I stopped focusing there. I didn't really have any obligations that I was particularly supposed to do, and we were able to sell our interest in it. So it wasn't like I neglected people or broke a promise when I did that. But there came a point where it was clear that this was all I needed. And so I was able to divert all of my focus and time and resources and creativity into making things work with Greg. And that worked, right? But I was able to just fully focus on it. It worked, it happened pretty quickly. Then once the product got cleared up, where we had broken through, where it was going to be pretty much downhill, it wasn't even fully created at that time. But I had broken through with Greg kind of personality-wise, work-wise, and with where we knew how the product was coming together, and a lot of it was already being made, or actually made and filmed and so forth. And so we'd broken through, and it was getting consolidated just fine. And then I was able to divert resources, make sure traffic was under control with Mike, and whatever it took to make sure that was going to happen, I made sure it was going to happen. So then I spent a lot of time and focus there next, and working with Mike on that. And then as much as it took, you see, once again, because if that's the next breakthrough I'm working on, then all of my resources can go there, unless with the max of as long as whatever that particular breakthrough is worth. So I'm not going to I'm being kind of flippant here, but I'm not going to sell my wife into slavery or something in order to achieve that result, just to come up with something extremely ridiculous. Or whatever. I'm not going to cut off my arm to make it happen. But in terms of my career and focus and so forth. But what I did do was I spent a fairly minimal amount of time with my family while I was building some of that up, because it needed to happen, right? I needed to break through. So there was a certain amount of time I wasn't willing to not spend with my family. So there's a certain part of my time that's reserved for my family. I didn't break into that, right? That's kind of set apart. But pretty much all my discretionary time, which was a lot, right? Let's say I spend 2 hours a day on average with my family. If I'm awake for 16 hours, that's like 14 hours to focus on my business. Because even when I'm eating, I can be thinking about it, right? And working on a notebook, sometimes talking to somebody, whatever. In between chews, right? You can get some conversation in. But one way or the other, I just put full and absolute focus of what I had available um, into the business, and other things that weren't just critically important in my life, such as my relationship with my wife. Uh, then I pretty much put no focus into. I don't really have a lot of activities cluttering up my life at that point. I didn't like just have like I don't know, just kind of random personal stuff going on that I needed to do. So I just brought powerful focus and my resources to bear, product, then traffic, and then that worked out well. And then conversion took a lot as well to kind of get the story straight and work on that. And then as that started to work, then I might go back to the product and kind of look for where's the next place where there's still resistance coming in, and trying to break through that next level of resistance. Right? You can kind of break one place where resistance is happening and where you kind of have a full breakthrough, let's say with a product, but there can be resistance related to the product coming from somewhere else in some sense. So you can, like, these kind of smaller breakthroughs, you can think of them as there's multiple sources of resistance in any, even just dealing with a product. And so you can break one source of resistance and consolidate there, and that constitutes a real breakthrough. But then if there's still other places of resistance, then you keep wanting to break that, right? And I continue that to this day, right? I look for sources of resistance or places where things might go wrong, and I continue to shore that up and make sure that that's either broken through or that we eliminate the reasonable possibility that something could go wrong. So the way that this is very different is it wasn't like as I was building OMG machines, I didn't think, all right, which activity is going to get me the most return on my investment? I didn't really think that way, right? I didn't think, all right, am I going to make more money if I make more sales? Yes. So therefore I'm going to focus on making more sales until I hit my income goal. And then I'll look around and make sure everything else is okay, is good enough. I did not think that way. So I'm not looking at what's the most bang per buck. In other words, I'm not looking to see where can I spend resources so I can seem to move forward the fastest. That's completely in the other paradigm of measuring progress by distance and check marks. So it had nothing to do with actual dollars or measuring dollars coming in. Now, overall, I was always planning so that after the breakthrough happened, we would be profitable, right? It wouldn't make any sense to be going for a breakthrough that after we were to have it, we still wouldn't be very well off. So certainly I would make sure I was going for breakthroughs that would actually be beneficial, right? And that would result in lots of profit once they were accomplished. So that I did for sure. But I wasn't looking to get the most distance for my dollar or the most money for my time. I completely wasn't looking at the situation in that way, right? And again, instead I was looking which breakthroughs do I need? If it's more than one, I basically pick the one that most appeals to me, or if nothing appeals to me more than the other, I pick one at random. And I realize that's totally fine to pick one at random because I already said I need them all, but I can only do one at a time most efficiently, right? So I pick one. And then I just put all my resources that I have for that type of task, and I divert them all into that one breakthrough. If an emergency comes up or there's a big problem that I have to solve, then for that day, let's say, or for as long as it takes, I deal with that emergency. I mentioned that thresholds were like a type of breakthrough. Like a threshold is when you're trying to jump over a particular jump a particular height or achieve a particular escape velocity to break out of an atmosphere, or like essentially it's kind of a jumping a certain height mental image instead of a breaking through a wall or breaking through resistance image. Either one is valid, and usually one or the other is more applicable to a particular situation. There's a type of threshold where there's what I call a deadfall. And a deadfall is different than a setback. Let me just show this on a slide here real quick. Okay, so what I said is a threshold is kind of a type of breakthrough. Okay, so a deadfall is something that's really just going to take you out and destroy the whole project that you're working on. Either your relationship will kind of particularly fully implode, or it'll it'll just kind of fully take you out, or your business will basically just go away, or maybe one of your type parts of your business, your traffic um, or your product or your conversion will just totally fail. And so if there's a potential deadfall, then it's worth anything to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? And when I say worth anything, again, I'm talking within the scale of the project that you're working on. So not selling your wife into slavery, but within the amount of potential focus you have for your career. That, or when I joke about that, which maybe isn't even worth joking about. Apologize if that sounds offensive. I fully mean it as a joke. But regardless, including also not cutting into kind of sacred time with your family. That if you were to particularly neglect your people, someone that's married to you, or your children that are depending on you, where that really wouldn't be right. Where you'd really be violating a previous breakthrough, or it's going to be kind of a deadfall, not just from your perspective, but from their perspective. And you'd be destroying something else. So that you don't want to spend, right? You don't really need to deficit spend in that way. So we're talking again just the resources that are relevant for the particular project that you're working on. Now, so it's kind of worth everything to break through breakthroughs that you need, but also to avoid something that'll fully take you out. And the one time when it's worth deficit spending, if you have to, you always want to not go into debt if possible, both money-wise and any other way. But you don't really need to go into debt generally to even have a breakthrough in a lot of cases. Although you for sure never want to go into debt to just like move forward a distance. Maybe to have a breakthrough, it might be worth going into debt. But even with that debt, you want to make sure that it's not going to it's hardly a breakthrough because you're creating more resistance, right? Like what I mean with debt is that you literally are having a situation where you're going to have resistance in the future from that, right? It's going to be interest on it and so forth. So it's typically not even worth it for a breakthrough, but it is worth it for a deadfall, which will totally destroy you. So better to have resistance than to totally implode, right? So that's the one time when you can go into debt, and it makes logical sense. Other times it might feel like feels like it makes sense, but it probably doesn't. There's one sort of opportunity-based deadfall that you can look out for, and what I mean is most every other deadfall is you have something working, and it could blow up. But there's one other type of situation where you can deficit spend and where it's like a deadfall, and that is getting started in the first place. If you're at square one, then you're already kind of dead, right, so to speak. And because that's what a deadfall does, unless it fully killed you, then you're kind of starting back at square one, right? So if you already are at square one, then any amount of debt now, all things being equal, you still don't want to go into debt, but you can put anything into, it's kind of worth anything to get started, right? So that's the one time when you can deficit spend in order to move forward, is to move off of square one. Other than that, you don't really want to deficit spend except for to avoid going back to square one. Now, a setback is, I guess, kind of a bit of a tough one. If it's going to cause you to lose a previous breakthrough, then it's pretty much the same thing. Dealing with that type of thing, it's the same as having the breakthrough in the first place. So your resource and your cost, you still probably don't want to deficit spend, because that creates more. The whole point of a breakthrough is you get rid of resistance. There's no point in creating resistance in order to get rid of resistance. So you don't need to deficit spend, but you put the same amount of resources into avoiding losing a breakthrough as you would having the breakthrough in the first place. But this is also why you want to consolidate. Generally, if you consolidate properly, you're not going to lose the breakthrough. You're not really going to have setbacks. But a deadfall is not a setback. A deadfall fully takes something out. If you can see the situation particularly clearly, you can ask me, well, David, hold on a second. You're saying that there's traffic, there's product, there's conversion. What if there's a deadfall that's going to take out your product but not your traffic and conversion? Then you won't be at square one, but you will have lost your breakthrough with your with your product? Well, there's a couple of things to explore with that. One is that it might be that your traffic and conversion will implode as well if your product implodes. If you've built things on top of your product. So with affiliate marketing, it's not affiliate marketing, but with affiliate traffic, like with OMG Machines, most of our traffic, our potential customers come from affiliates. If our product blows up, then generally that'll blow up probably our affiliate promotions to some degree, and it might blow up our conversion. So then it's kind of one and the same to a decent degree. Now, perhaps that is a good reason why I should try to a little bit separate those two. But in life, as I indicated this in the previous video, it's not really plausible to not build in life, right? You can't just have everything be separate and not built on top of something else in order to avoid the problem of if the bottom block blows up, then other things get ruined. Again, it's not really, you need to build in life. You need to build one thing on top of the other. You need to stack one thing on top of the other. So the real answer is to tend to build things so they're not going to have a default later on. However, if there was a particular disaster that wasn't going to be reasonable for you to have planned for, that might just fully take out everything, or it might take out the product, which would result in everything else falling as well, then you could deficit spend in order to not have that happen. Otherwise, if it's just a setback. Now, you could say, oh, well, in my judgment, then the resistance from this debt that I'm incurring, either from money or from taking time from my relationship that I shouldn't be taking, or where I'm not spending enough time with my wife or that kind of thing. Or if I'm incurring favors with people that I don't necessarily want to incur favors with, where I'm kind of borrowing on their kind of favors or time, then you might think, oh, well, that resistance is going to be less than the resistance than the resistance that I'm getting rid of by having this breakthrough. Yeah, that might be the case. I still find that I just really don't need to deficit spend very much at all. But if it's clear that that's the case, then sure, logically speaking, you can incur like a lesser resistance in order to overcome a clearly greater resistance, and then you can just pay that debt back as soon as kind of the next thing you can do while you're consolidating is pay that debt. And maybe you're creating a situation where that debt is causing a bit of resistance, but it's not really needing a breakthrough to pay back. Maybe you just can pay it back over time pretty clearly. So that's all reasonable. But as long as you kind of see the whole situation in this mental model, then you can make a good decision on whether you want to deficit spend or not. Mostly, I find I don't need to. And let's go back to the previous slide. I'm still on this topic, but I'm going to go back to the previous slide here. Mostly, I just try to bring enough resources to bear to have a breakthrough. Here's a good example of like deficit spending in a way that really kind of backfires. So let's say that you're trying to make a sale. Now, a sale in and of itself, it's useful to start to ask yourself, is making the sale a result, like a checkbox, or is it a real breakthrough? And if what people can do is they can actually deficit spend where the resistance from the deficit is greater and is worse than the resistance that they were trying to overcome with a breakthrough. So people can make a sale in such a way that it creates a lot of resistance because they're promising stuff that really isn't going to be fulfilled. And so that's going to create a lot of resistance after someone buys. And you might be in a worse position than if you just didn't make that sale in the first place. Maybe now you're working so hard to fulfill what you promised and you don't really know how to do it, that your time and your focus and your energy is all in there and not growing your business as you could have. Maybe you could have made 70% of the sales that you made with a lesser offer, but then that was an offer that you were easily able to fulfill. Everyone's going to be happy. You're going to get testimonials. That's going to give you momentum, and you're going to be freed up now to do the next thing in building your business. So you make less sales, but you're way better off, and you're going to make a lot more money. Not even in the long run, more like in the kind of mid-run or short to mid-run, even the short run. So you want to be thinking of that. The reason I'm very careful about deficit spending is that, or deficit spending is also similar to burning resources. Like if you're, um, so when I say that I divert all of my resources towards a particular breakthrough, I'm still then I need to clarify that, because the beautiful thing about having a good idea of the breakthrough that you're trying to achieve, like that you need your product to have a certain clarity and quality to it that's going to get the result that people are looking for, and it's going to match your offer in particular, is really what I should have always said is that I bring sufficient resources to bear to do it quickly and efficiently, have that breakthrough with an extra little buffer where I'm pretty sure where, even if things go reasonably wrong, like reasonably predictably wrong, but where I got kind of unlucky, but unlucky in a way that was always pretty plausible, pretty possible, even if there was like a 10% chance of it, but not like a 0.01% chance of. I'm not looking to bring so many resources to bear that if there's a very, very small chance that something very unlikely would happen, and that's going to cost me a lot of resources to remove that last little percentage, then I probably won't spend those extra resources. But anything that reasonably could go wrong, even if it would be unlucky, but it still could happen with a reasonable percentage of possibility, then I'll have that buffer. So I'll bring enough resources to bear to have the breakthrough or to get over the threshold to make the sale, for example. I'll make that offer good enough that I'm getting plenty of the people, that I'm overcoming any kind of reasonable objection or even unreasonable but fairly common objection that someone might have, as long as I can fulfill it in the offer in the first place, right, without deficit spending. But if I have to put more into that offer and more work in order to make the sale to a reasonably larger number of people, I'll do that. So you have that buffer of resources where you're putting more resources than the minimum to get over, like in the best of conditions, but you're not really going for overkill past a reasonable buffer. So again, I'm trying to have a breakthrough or get escape velocity, or I'm trying to get enough traffic or a good enough product or a good enough conversion. What I'm trying to do is divert as many resources as I need to be assured of that breakthrough, to be assured of having the breakthrough reasonably quickly, and to have a buffer of breaking through where I'm not trying to divert the barest minimum of resources, but past a reasonable buffer, I'm not trying to do more than that. And once you are looking in that way, once you have that mental model I just described, it's pretty easy to estimate. Of course, you don't know exactly, right, like about how many resources you need to have a good reasonable buffer, but not more than that. But once you're knowing that that's what you're trying to estimate at, then you can usually do a pretty good job of that. Now, I also have the word synergy here. Let's suppose I need, just to put it in a way that we can have a mental picture, let's suppose I need 10 pounds of resources in order to break through a particular wall, right, or resistance. Well, you could say, what do you mean by 10 pounds? I'm just coming up with something where I'm quantifying it for the sake of what I'm going to say next. Then let's suppose let's say I need 10 pounds of explosives, all right, 10 pounds of dynamite. Then let's say I can get 8 pounds of dynamite. I have a source that only has 8 pounds, and it's only like $5 to get that 8 pounds of dynamite. And then let's suppose that it costs $1,000 to get that extra 2 pounds. Then it's worth it to spend $1,005 to get the 10 pounds, because I need the 10 pounds to break through, you see? So resource decisions are easy. If we're judging by bang per buck and distance, then it seems like a no-brainer to just get the 8 pounds of explosives for $5, and then you stay stuck and you don't know what happened. So once you understand you have to break through, then you pay anything that you need to within what's relevant for that topic, right? Within that type of thing in life. You don't want to deficit spend if you can help it. Particularly make sure you don't deficit spend in a way that creates a worse resistance later on after the breakthrough. If blowing up this wall, if behind the wall is $400 and that's it, then of course I don't want to buy the dynamite for $1,005 just to blow up a wall to get $400, so to speak, right? So you always have a sense of proportion in mind. But often in life, the resources necessary for a breakthrough are far less than the rewards of having the breakthrough. But people still feel like it's not worth doing because it looks like they can make so much more progress for cheaper by just not having the breakthrough. If it takes you 3 days to really understand one beginning SEO technique that might only be like 3 videos, but you have to kind of work at it and figure out what's going on and do it, and that gives you a good foothold to start from, then that can be worth it. But generally people might have this sort of arbitrary amount of value or distance in their mind that they need to cover, and they might think that's way too long for 3 videos or for one technique. But it's totally arbitrary. Their measure has no anchor in reality, right? It's just this feeling they have. Or people will think, oh well, I need to make this work within 90 days or something's wrong. But that's a totally random number. If their breakthrough is going to get you $10,000 a month for years to come, and probably build from there, right? Probably not just stay at 10,000. Normally you're going to grow if you hit 10,000. Then really, is that only worth 3 months, or else forget about it? But people will intuitively feel that way. It's incredible. But it's worth probably 10 years of focusing, and as long as you have some stable base where you're okay, well, if a person has to focus between the ages of 30 and 39 in order to start making $10,000 a month and having that grow, that might be very worth it, and their own business and so forth. So, and it doesn't take nearly that long, even in the worst case with OMG machines, right? Probably anybody, no matter where they're starting, can start making things work nicely for themselves in 5 or 6 months. Plenty of people, depending on the head start they already have, or just luck, right, and other factors, might make things work within 2 months. But somewhere between like the 2 to 6 month range is pretty reasonable. But you need to decide for yourself what makes sense in terms of what the breakthrough is worth to you. And it ends up being so easy to happily and without second guessing yourself spend your resources properly, and also not overspend. I constantly don't overspend. People that are just observing me and trying to put me in a box might think, oh, he's cheap, in this case, or maybe I'm spending a bunch in this case. But all that's going on is, again, their measuring stick is all off because they're in this other paradigm of measuring by distance and progress and like kind of, bang per buck, right? It's very linear. And once you understand that I'm going for a breakthrough, then it's worth zero to me to pay for something that is not related to the next breakthrough that I'm doing. It's worth zero to exceed my buffer. I don't want to pay anything more than what's going to comfortably get me over the breakthrough. But it's worth a lot to me to break through. And that's how you should operate as well. And you'll spend your resources in life very efficiently. And then you're not wasting and burning them, so that you have more resources later, or you have resources you might have burned before, you'll have them in the future for when you need them for another breakthrough. And so this can reframe the whole idea of missed opportunities. There's always a virtually unlimited number of opportunities in life that you're missing, right? Think about every stock that's going up or down today, or today's Sunday, but yeah, on a day when stocks are being traded. Then every single one of those can be thought of as an opportunity that you're missing, right? To go either short or long on the stock. If you put all your money into a stock that moved a lot and you did it in the right direction, then that would have been an opportunity today. Clearly, once we look at it that way, there's no way, and imagine feeling bad about missing each and every one of those opportunities each day, right? You'd be crying yourself to sleep each night. Thousands of missed stock opportunities every single day. But so clearly there's far more opportunities, and that might go away forever, right? You'll never have the opportunity to trade that stock today, to take advantage of today's movement after today. So these are opportunities that appear and fully go away. You'll never ever be able to take advantage of them. They're lost to you forever. But there's way more of these than you're clearly able to take advantage of, right? So let go of that and stop worrying about opportunities in general. An opportunity has no meaning, except as relative to the breakthrough that you're currently working on. If you see a particularly great opportunity to break through a breakthrough that you know that you want to achieve, if you're working on a product and a terrifically good opportunity seems to come along for traffic, then it's okay if you want to sort of waste or kind of, you realize that you might be starting from scratch again with trying to break through with the product. But if you haven't gotten started very much and you have a great opportunity somewhere else, then you can use your judgment and decide, all right, I'm going to focus in on this other breakthrough instead because I see this really good opportunity or leverage or like an opening or something. That's okay as long as you understand the cost, as long as you understand you're probably going to set yourself back to the beginning with the other breakthrough that you're working on. But as long as you're operating within the right mental model and looking at the whole situation properly, then that's an okay call to make. But just make sure you're looking at it with the right mental model. And I've referred to this before. I've told people, of course, generally when people are on OMG machines, they're on a lot of other mailing lists as well for various software and business opportunities. And so you can mostly ignore those things except for what you need to have your next breakthrough. And then you can buy smartly and you buy things you're going to use and need and they're going to be helpful for you, right? So just do it that way. So there's your advice. Forget about, oh, this is going off sale forever. There's always going to be opportunities, even opportunities are going to go away forever. And you're going to miss 99.99999% of them in life. So just accept that and stop trying to avoid that. And this is why we want to maintain focus and not run ourselves in this direction and that direction and chase after this and chase after that. Focus on a particular breakthrough because you need to build up essentially momentum, right? You need to build up, you need to poke around and get reconnaissance, build up knowledge, organize your knowledge, build a vehicle to break through. Where's that slide? Right? And you're going to be committing resources to breaking through. So you can't just keep on starting from square one all the time, right? If you abandon a breakthrough that you're trying to make, you're pretty rapidly going to end up where most everything that you've currently put into that breakthrough is going to mostly be gone when you come back to it. Including just in your own head. If you're flitting from one problem in life to another and worrying about this, worrying about that, you don't want that. You want your subconscious problem solving, your creative focus of your brain to be working on one thing at a time. If it keeps popping from one thing to another, then you're going to be losing all the progress you made over and over and over again throughout the day, several times a day. People just like wipe the whole board clean with the breakthrough that their mind was working on, and it's incredibly inefficient. And so people stay so stuck in life. And it's horrendous. When you realize what's going on, it's incredible waste. Instead, I am very constantly, my mind, my subconscious, like my problem-solving part of my mind, this big machine working on generating kind of ideas and potential avenues for breakthrough and so forth, is operating on one thing, and it's continuing to operate on one thing. And so then it has much more of an ability to help me break through than if it's just scattered. Same thing if your resources are committed in all different directions, then you don't have enough cash or time or mental energy or physical energy, or you don't have the strength of personal relationships or the favors to call in or whatever to break through in the place that you're trying to break through because everything's scattered around and not focused. All right, I will end this discussion video here. And we're still not done with the slide. We still have a couple of lines to go. But consolidating, like we're doing now, where we're further explaining and broadening and integrating our knowledge of this breakthroughs and consolidation, it's worth it. As much consolidating as it takes to lock in that breakthrough. It's not worth trying to build or stack or move forward until you've locked in your progress with consolidating. Which kind of covers this this next line anyway. Excited about that last breakthrough and already want the next one. So in the next video, we'll likely finish this slide, and we might even go on to some other slides. Who would think? All right, I will talk to you then.